All right, welcome everyone. Today is Thursday, February the 4th, and this is our CSI Secrets community call. Again, we are under the CNCF guidance for code of conduct. So again, if you're kind with everyone, you'll be okay. We got a decent agenda. We got a couple of items on the agenda here, and without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into it. The first one, I think Rita is going to talk about some disconnect scenarios. This one's interesting. I got some opinions about it. But Rita, when you're ready, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, this is just basically open up to all the folks involved in this project to see if people have been hearing requests or requirements for disconnected scenarios. And if so, what are some like detailed requirements?
Yeah, I know I've seen some chatter, obviously, internally. I guess my concern, and I think I brought this up with Anish, is are we getting into kind of like an anti-pattern of what the solution is to provide? And then would you consider like a time to live for the secret? Like what would be the duration of you being offline from talking to like your cert provider? So those are the things that I was curious about.
Yeah, actually, I brought this topic up with Tommy, and then we briefly discussed this as well. I think the most obvious solution that stands out when we say offline is maintaining it in memory, right? But also having it in memory would mean we have to cache the access method. So we need to know how long the access method that's used for accessing the external secret store is valid. And then we need to make sure that the pod that's using that particular access method, does it still have access to it? So all these criteria come into picture. Other than just caching the content, it's also, we need to cache these access policies, the ACL basically,
Right.
to see if we can give the content back to the pod.
Yeah, and I think, the CSI driver today, if you think about it, right, is caching the content in a way, right? Like we don't ever check the access get revoked, right? Unless you have like the rotation feature turned on, I guess. In which case, I guess if the access were revoked, you wouldn't be able to retrieve like the latest content or whatever. But I definitely think, yeah, to Phil's point, that is an anti-pattern. So I'm curious, like, are other providers or plugins also facing similar requests? And as a community, what is our stance around this? Specifically, is this a supported scenario?
I'll just make my like current stance on caching has been that like once it's in the application, it's in the application. They can hold it as long as they want. Like that's not up to me as the like API middleware. And I briefly considered caching, but yeah, I was most concerned to not like continuing to hold the secret, but whether or not to like hold the authorization chain for like new schedules that are like new scheduled pods. And I don't have much information on like what customer requirements would be for how long like they would expect kind of outages to last, to where that caching would be a protection against that versus just an optimization. Right, like if I have multiple pods accessing the same secret, like rather than making many calls, like I can batch those up and only make one call to the secret manager. But yeah, I haven't been thinking much about like supporting the disconnected scenario in the CSI driver. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something to think about. I mean, I think, you know, if you just look at a lot of the new architectures, I mean, the edge scenarios are coming up a lot more, you know. But I guess, again, my kind of opinion is, how do we keep the integrity of the purpose of the solution, you know?
I guess my initial thought is that it's not, I don't know that the CSI driver should be the one kind of like worrying about the disconnection or like the plugins.
Yeah, I think the main concern is during the pod restart. I mean, only then, because we are in the actual path where the pod gets created and is run. So,
Right. So the current experience is, as long as it can't talk to the key store, it would just fail to mount and the pod would just get stuck. And I think depending on how long the disconnect is, that may or may not be acceptable to the application workload. Yeah.
This was I was also talking in a share on the care behavior. Like we could also change the behavior of like the plugin or the CSI driver to succeed mounts, even if there are failures accessing secrets. And then it puts kind of like the responsibility on like watching the health of the secret on the application. So it's less good in that way, but it changes something from being like a startup critical like dependency to, you know, an optional dependency that like can become healthy later through the reconciler. And, you know, like, but that does require like application changes to gracefully degrade like in that.
That's an interesting thought. But yeah, it would be different from like how Kubernetes secrets work.
I think something like that would definitely need to be an opt-in behavior, because I think it's much easier to use and debug if it just like
Well, and it's not backward compatible.
Yeah,
for sure. It's a very big change.
So that doesn't like solve disconnect, but it is a way to not like a graceful degradation on disconnect. Is kind of how that behavior could work.
Do we have like to define like use cases?
Do you mean requirements?
Yeah, like is it just, hey, I'm gonna have a cluster that's not gonna be able to talk to the cert manager for X amount of days or something?
Yeah, so far the
Okay.
ones we've heard is basically, you know, the cluster is temporarily not losing connectivity to the store, and because of that, pod restarts would just fail to instantiate the pod. That's basically the gist. Yeah, we should definitely clarify like how long the disconnect is, and maybe that depending on how long the disconnect is, that is okay. But that's why I'm raising this question, right? Is what if other people have this requirement as well?
Yeah,
it sounds like it.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No. What I just thought about is, I mean, could you have two types of functionalities for this, right? Because maybe you say, okay, the way it works now is kind of more, I don't know, secure or just, but then you have another kind of profile of secrets that can get mounted that you say, okay, I'm okay if this is not as secure where it's talking directly to your cert provider for like the caching functionality. So maybe it's not an all up type of functionality that all of them get this. You define the certain certs that you say, okay, these are the ones I wanted to be offline if need be.
I think we might be able to like implement a lot of this through just the provider specific configuration. Like, I think I could probably add an option to the GCP one that's like, don't error if like there are errors accessing secrets, or like on secrets set like an acceptable driver cache time. So maybe the thing is to not be too prescriptive at the driver and explore like how plugins and is like HashiCorp on the call. Like they might just recommend like adding replication, because I think their products can have multi-data center replication, right? Might be.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Okay.
Yeah, I am on the call. Although I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of the meeting, so I don't quite have all the context.
Oh, so we're talking about the first item on the agenda, which is discuss if folks are hearing requirements to support disconnect scenarios. And one is we need to clarify what the requirements are, and then see if there are some potential solutions we can offer if it's a supported scenario.
What kind of disconnects are we talking? All of the possible disconnects or something specific?
Yeah, so it could be a brief disconnect where maybe the repeated mount failure and then retry is okay. That's the first one. The second one would be there's quite a long time disconnect for which, as Tommy mentioned, maybe the providers can then provide a way to say, okay, if a timeout is this long, then return succeed for mount, and then let the application deal with the secret aspect of it later within the application.
Right. Yeah. I see. It's tricky because we block the application actually starting until we return. So yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think I'll have to go away and think about that one a bit. But yeah, it would be. I agree. It'd be good to get some requirements, kind of guidelines and stuff together.
I guess the extreme scenario is, hey, I got a DoD customer. I got a cluster on some submarine. It's going away for months. not connected to nothing. It's going to be on the ocean floor.
Yeah.
That's the full extreme of it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think we have an issue where people were saying like, hey, can you like cache the secret in the cluster, right? So like basically don't delete the Kubernetes secret once it's created. I think it's somewhat related to this, so that if that connectivity is gone, at least you have that secret in the cluster and then the pod can continue to use it.
Yeah, I think that's a good fallback mechanism, because I think even with caching the secrets in the provider, the problem is if the provider restarts in the disconnect cluster, then basically we've lost all the contents. But Kubernetes secrets are persistent, so that way the user can say in disconnect, we can still rely on Kubernetes secret as fallback. So the CSI driver can still succeed the volume mount and say, yeah, you can start off, and then the pod reads from the Kubernetes secret. because they still won't be able to reach the external secret store on their own from their application. So,
Right, that's true.
Yeah, if they're comfortable like capping the secret to Kubernetes secrets, and I think all of that is like driver logic, right?
right.
Then
But then it's like, when do you delete it?
right, yeah.
Right.
And it's sort of an anti-pattern. Like once you create it, it's forever on the cluster.
Right. Yeah.
Which is actually brings up another thing that I was talking to Nish about, is like, I wish Kubernetes had like a TTL for secrets, right? Where we can just tell Kubernetes, after I want you to create for this long, but go delete yourself after this point in time. I think that would be super nice to have. But I don't think that exists today.
Ephemeral Kubernetes secrets.
Okay, I think we
But
captured a lot.
again, if we want to handle this in the CSI driver, we could still do that with the TTL in the secret. Like, I mean, if we say that this is the driver created the Kubernetes secret, we'll handle the lifetime. The user can configure a TTL, which we'll add as an annotation to the secret. And then after the annotation is elapsed, then we'll just go delete the secret from the driver.
Yeah, I think that will work. So have like the driver handle the TTL basically.
Yeah.
That could be a good workaround. But if we were to do this, I definitely would want Sagoth's opinion on this. Sounds anti-pattern-ish.
I don't know if this has been brought up already, but I guess another option is to have a configurable that the driver consumes that says don't block pod startup on the secret material all being mounted. And then, yeah, we can give that escape valve for applications to handle secrets being missing. It doesn't feel like that would be something that many people would want, but yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested to hear if there are people who want that.
Yeah, I was kind of proposing that as a plugin option first to see if it to see if there are customers that actually want that.
Okay, how come plugin rather than driver level?
Just like it's easier, I think, for individual it could be both, but I think like it could be implemented in plugins like today without kind of like going through the just kind of like treating the plugins as like a playground for some of the options before making it like driver like behavior or baking it into the driver. Where then like it might be harder to remove features from the driver than the plugins. Is my only like kind of thought there.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I guess I was just thinking feels like a kind of pod level configurable, which yeah, I kind of see as more the driver responsibility. But yeah, it's you're probably right. It's easier to remove features from plugins than from the driver.
Okay, this is a really, really good discussion. I think for next step, I think let's create an issue for disconnect scenarios and then ask users like what are some requirements. I think that's that will at least give us a sense of like, is this, how many people want this, and what the acceptable behaviors might be, right? And then maybe we can come up with certain proposals. How does that sound?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, I can
right.
go ahead and create that issue, I guess.
Okay, thanks, Rita. All right, So now we're going to move on to the proposal. Tommy, you want to talk to us about the secret store CSI driver file IO consolidation?
Yeah.
And I got your doc open here as well.
Yeah, so I mentioned this, I think, briefly on 1 or 2 meetings ago, but there's, right now the plugins are responsible for writing the files to the file system, and it turns out writing files to the file system can be more tricky than one would hope, and this resulted in like kind of 2 file system IO bugs so far. And it's like for new plugins to be created, they will need to be mindful of these same issues that like have been fixed here. So the idea is, can we like solve this once in the driver to make writing plugins like easier? So my proposal here, or like initial draft of it, is we currently have the mount response, where we have the object versions, which is kind of the metadata about like around rotation of the files, but to extend it to include the actual like file contents. So this would be like the file name or the relative path of the file, the permissions on the file, and then the contents of the file. And kind of taking this from the key to path type that is used by config maps and secrets, and applying kind of the same, if you could scroll down a little bit more on the details. Yeah, applying the same validation to like file paths that are currently done with config maps and secret types, and using those code paths in the driver to write the file contents. This, has, I think there is a bug open about permissioning of files. This will provide a way to solve that. But one of the main drawbacks is that like right now, the plugins can like read a secret, write the value immediately, like read the next secret, write it. But this would require the entire like contents to be in memory and passed over the RPC channel. So I did some looking at like the max secret sizes and of different secret stores. Right now, the like secret provider class does not have like the driver doesn't know really about the files or like how those map to secrets currently. And there's no like, these are the max number of secrets, or this is the max size of the mount that I'm aware of currently. But to make this work, both like the driver and the plugins would need to update their like deployment limits to support like the largest volume that is being mounted. So I just did some napkin math and some assumptions of like, I think it's rare to have more than 10 secrets in one volume, and that like how many concurrent requests like would be happening, and yeah, some stuff there. We can change the gRPC message size limits, but if you did try to do a mount that was over these limits, you could just repeatedly fail, or you could the process, and yeah, that would be difficult to get out of. One other option would be to change from like unary request response to a streaming to where the like response would be streamed to the driver of each like file at a time. But that's I think that might be harder to do backwards compatible way, and depending on the like semantics of partial failures that the driver wants to enforce, the driver may still need to have like the entire contents in memory. I think overall the memory isn't too much of an issue because it writes to a tempfs, which is memory already. But it, I think, could be difficult to kind of like tune the deployment to something. Yeah, just gonna point it there. So yeah, I just wrote this up looking for feedback and whether or not it's something we think we should pursue or not. That concludes my presentation.
Awesome. Questions, comments? I see, really, you've already put a couple of comments in here.
I think, yeah, I mean, the most relevant one, I think, is the same one that you just mentioned, which is like, how does this approach now affect the size of the secret that is supported? Because I don't think we ever really needed to think about that for plugins, right? Because you just get the data and mount it. But now that there's this communication between the two, now we have to think about what does the gRPC client like support, and that may limit us, right?
Yeah. I guess I'm also not sure when the driver makes the tempfs, does that get charged to the system, or like who does that get charged to? The the memory required in the file system. Does that get charged to the driver pod, or is it just system overhead?
Do you mean who creates it, or sorry, I'm
Right.
not sure I understand the question.
Because the driver
Yes.
creates the tempfs, correct?
The driver, yes.
So
Are you
like,
asking, is it allocated at the host
Yeah,
level or the pod level?
yeah, like is that memory charged against the driver pod, or is it like charged against?
I would think the driver pod, because yeah, in general, memory volumes are part of the specified pod's memory allocation. So it seems like it would be the same deal for the driver, but not 100%.
I guess like we may actually have this limit currently. It's just no one hits it. But yeah, maybe that's an action item for me to test out the driver and see what happens when I give it a bunch of large secrets.
So this is about the pod memory limit, right? Like you're asking if whatever contents we write to tempfs, if it accounts for the pod memory.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually interesting.
Yeah, I didn't think about this one. Because I just assume that it's mounting on the host, and then the plugin just writes to the path
On the host, yeah.
on the host. So yeah, I'll kind of assume everything's happening on the host, but
Yeah, I'll take that as a question to look up or to experiment with. Because if it is charged against the pod and we don't see this like then like most of this probably doesn't matter. But if if it's not charged against the pod, then like this could matter a lot more. Like it could be that most people's limits just are high enough and like their secrets are small enough to where it's fitting within the driver pod. Or it could be that the driver pod's not getting charged for the temp FSs.
I think what I said was wrong, by the way. I was thinking of memory volumes, and yeah, the temp FS isn't a memory volume. It's actually, yeah, as you say, on the host itself, isn't it?
Right. I was thinking more that like now we have to worry about, because you're sending the file content over to the driver now, right? So that is a limit in itself. And that we haven't had that kind of restriction yet. So it will be a new limitation that we're introducing, which is fine, but it's just net new, yeah.
Yeah, I think if we went to streaming it, like to string the responses back, then that we could have the, like the stream size be big enough to carry any of these secret sizes, but to do all files at once in like one go, I think is the, yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like that's the only, like, I guess, open question at the moment. I think, the failure behavior and all that seems pretty straightforward to me. And I don't see that's like any different from what we do today, right? So it's not like a regression or anything. I just want to confirm my understanding.
Yeah,
okay.
Some of that I think can be plugin behavior of like how the plugin responds to the driver, like on partial failures, is just why I bring it up, because it would become well, I guess the plugin could choose to just give back the files that worked. So yeah, I think there's no change there.
Yeah, I mean, me and Tommy discussed this offline as well. Like today, the way we handle partial errors, so we don't do partial errors today, right? Today, all the plugins, what they do is they start going through the loop, and then the first content that they hit an error with, they return an error. So if you have 5 items, then if 2 of them are able to be accessed, the third one has an issue with accessing, the 2 contents are returned to file system, then we return on the third one. But I think one thing that we were discussing was instead even if the provider is doing it or driver is doing it, one option is out of all the contents, if there are errors, we keep consolidating the errors, but we continue to the rest of the items and write the remaining items and just return all the aggregate of errors. So that is one option. Or the other option is being atomic. So if even one item fails, then we say we are not going to write any of this to the file system, and then we fail the entire mount.
Yeah, I've just pushed a change to the GCP plugin where I batch read all of the secrets at once and then block on writing them to know if there are any failures. I haven't pushed that as a release yet, but I wanted to test out that kind of error behavior, so that if you would never get a partial error by doing that. It has the same like, okay, now that the plugin needs to hold all of the secret contents in memory, but with like 64K secret sizes, I'm pretty confident that it won't. You'd have to have a pretty large secret provider class before you hit that limit. So I'm not.
Yeah, agreed. It's not likely to be a problem frequently. If we can come up with a mitigation or some kind of escape hatch for the times when people do want to scale it past 4 megabytes per message, that would be ideal. But yeah, there are a lot of really nice properties of this proposal in terms of security and kind of separating concerns between the provider and driver. So yeah, I'm really keen on helping to find a way around the limitations that we'll be introducing in gRPC. I think it should be worth it.
Yeah, the max I've seen right now in terms of secret provider class is while interacting with a user for Azure plugin on Slack, they had about 150 key vault contents that they were retrieving with just one secret provider class.
Wow. Maybe we should put some limits.
Okay. Okay. Good to. Thank you for providing a number.
That's really interesting because like now I'm thinking they would not be able to do this with like Kubernetes secrets. Like if they were to create it, it would exceed the SCD limits. So it's like really a way to get around that score.
Yeah. Okay. It could also be like a documentation and providing good knobs to turn to. So yeah, take a look. The comments. I'll get back to the comments.
Sorry. So about that scenario that you just mentioned, Anish, like would this would definitely break them, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll easily hit the limits for the size.
Yeah, so we should think about this. So no backward compatibility there.
Right.
But also regarding what you guys were saying about the batch mount thing, I think not having it done in a batch is helpful for the scenario we talked about earlier, where you just like mount the things that are successful, and then for anything that failed, we wait for the timeout and then just succeed, and then let the application deal with it. If you do it in a batch, that wouldn't be possible, right? So I can see an argument for that approach, just so we can support that down the road.
Yeah, I think the interesting scenario is during a rotation, right? So during a rotation, do we want to batch or still allow partial? Because if we allow partial, if 2 keys are in sync, username, password, we don't want to update one of them. And doing batch there would be the right way to go, to say everything will be updated, or we leave everything to the old value.
I feel like this is one of those times when being opinionated will always alienate someone. And so ultimately, we should make it configurable.
Right.
All the flags. It's also like too many options. Sometimes it's super confusing too. It's hard.
All right, cool. So yeah, definitely some good discussion. I'll make sure I'll post this in the Slack to have the rest of the community take a look at it. Okay, let me just, well, are we done? Let me make sure before we move on. Okay.
I think so.
So should we, sorry, just when should we make a decision about this, I guess? I just want to make sure you're not blocked. Yeah.
I would recommend we let this sit for like at least until through another meeting, like another 2 weeks. Get people have to look at it.
Sounds good.
And then I guess after that, then I would probably just create the GitHub issue, and yeah, depending on comments.
All right.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think one good point that Rita had brought up is during the last meeting was this is the change. If this is the way we want to go, then we want to have a release with this at some point so that this could be used for the security audit as well. But right now, the security audit is still in the initial process. They haven't found a vendor and all that. So we still have time, but I'm just bringing that up.
Yeah, and this is added to the agenda as well. So I think in the last meeting, Anish, you mentioned that maybe in a month or so.
Yes.
So so that was like 2 weeks ago. So maybe a few weeks, they may find a vendor, and so there's some urgency there, I guess.
Yeah, so I think the PR is ready to be merged yesterday for the audit. So it will probably be merged this week, and then the next week is the call where we talk about the vendors. But I'll also update this meeting about what's happening in the other one, so that we know where the timeline and everything in terms of progress we need to make. But this is not on the agenda, but me and Tommy merged few PRs in the driver to remove the old driver provider logic. So we no longer have that logic to maintain, so it's good. We stubbed out a lot of code.
So happy.
Nice. We got, let's see, just real quick, I mean, we got 6 open. Do we want to chat about these or?
So the first 3, I've added it to the next milestone. And then the 4th one is work in progress. So that's basically allowing E2E test to run locally. For the E2E test framework to be updated, the person who opened the PR, he said he'll update the PR. He hasn't been able to get to it. So, but I'm also going to ping him and see if he needs any help so that we can help and get it across the line. And for the 5th one is interesting. The Helm 3 stuff, it's been there for a while, but I'll take a look at it. I think everyone can take a look at it. It's basically doing CRDs the correct way using Helm 3, moving the CRDs to the CRDs directory. And then that also means that CRDs won't get deleted during uninstall, won't get updated during the next upgrade. So one is fine, but the second thing that I had seen while trying out the PR was in an effort to move from Helm 2 to Helm 3, the charts that get published when they are installed, if not installed, when they're upgraded, they delete the existing CRDs, which could be a breaking change and data loss. So I'm trying to find a way to get around that. I think if we do that, then we should be able to merge that PR and then go ahead with it.
Cool. Thanks, Anish. All right. I think that takes us to the end. So let's see, the next meeting will be Thursday, February 18th. I will go ahead and post the proposal on the Slack channel, and we'll have the video up later today as well. And if there's no other comments, we'll go ahead and end the meeting. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you in a couple
Thank you.
weeks.
Thank you. Good to see everyone. Bye.
All right.